Um, Thank you so much for making time and space for this today, Alicia.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. Well, we will go ahead and get started, and Tracy will monitor the chat box. So if anyone has any questions, please put them in there. And yeah, I guess it's only 12:01. Waiting for a Zoom to start is like the longest minute, right? And then I'm always like, I want to give people a little bit of time to hop on. And then it's like, okay, that's the longest 3 minutes of our lives. But we're going to go ahead and get started. So yeah, let's start off, Alicia, by, well, I'll introduce you first, right? That makes sense. So I'm Lindsay with Live.Laugh Denver. We are doing real investing stories to help people see what their opportunities are to invest. I think that, part of our culture is like, don't talk about money. And that has been for the haves and the have-nots, and it's continued that separation. And so I am in a place where I'm trying to empower everyone to have these conversations and empower working Americans to leverage the tax benefits and the long-term wealth building benefits of investing in real estate, knowing that everyone's story is a little bit different. And so Alicia's been in real estate for a very long time, which is crazy because she's my age, but way more mature. That's a whole different conversation. She's been in it for a long time, but isn't it correct that it was your first two investment properties that you bought last year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, one technically in 21 and one in January of this year.
Okay. Yeah. So I just found that to be so fascinating because they jumped in big, and I didn't ask her too many questions about it. So I get to learn with you guys today. I wanted to, wait and learn with you guys today. So Alicia Holdaway is in Salt Lake. She is a broker with Summit Sotheby's there. Top 3 in the market, I believe. She is a totally amazing agent who leads by service. We met through our coaching company, Buffini & Company, and have become amazing friends. And I value her so much. She is a queen of all things Salt Lake real estate, but when it came to investing, she actually leveraged a relationship outside of Utah. So we're going to have her tell us her story, and then do a little Q&A with her. And then of course, yes, keep the chats coming. So Alicia, can you start by telling us, did I cover your story?
Yeah. And interestingly enough, so I say that these are our 2 first investments. We actually bought a spec home in 2007, which I think everybody realizes just by the date of that purchase, how that went. Mm-hmm. And, I started, part of why I got into real estate is because my previous career was working for a real estate investing and business coaching company. I sold real estate coaching and investment coaching for 8 years for a company that anybody who's really investigated real estate at all probably knows about, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Yeah. And, I saw these success stories and all of these people investing and had coaches at my fingertips and didn't leverage any of it. And just kind of jumped in to a spec home with a friend. My husband's good friend from high school decided to become a builder in the frenzy of the housing boom of 2005, 6, 7. And the result of that is we didn't do any due diligence. We totally strictly went based on our trust in him, which proved to be really catastrophic. He stole cash from us. We never should have invested in that property in the first place. It was in the stated loan time frame where we never should have been able to qualify for the home. And all said and done, we had to short sell the property. We lost our shorts. Pun intended, and lost our relationship, just everything that could have gone wrong. It was the classic example of a builder, appraiser, lender being in cahoots with each other. Mm-hmm. The exact example of why a lot of the restrictions and rules that are in place today exist. Yep. And we just kind of learned everything not to do. And that set my husband, it sent him for a tailspin. He was like big fat X to real estate investing. And it took me until the last couple of years for us to really take a step back and decide what had to be in place fundamentally before we were willing to jump into the real estate market from an investment standpoint, so that now we can go big. So.
Yes. Well, that is, I mean, talk about perfect timing in the worst way, right? Definitely 2007 spec home, know the builder. I mean, I understand why Brad became apprehensive. Excuse me. Can you talk a little bit about your guys' home ownership path too? Because I know that that has led to equity for you guys as well that you're able to leverage.
Yeah, thank goodness. We got married. I was only 21 when we got married, and we bought a house within a couple of months of 3 months of being married. So thankfully, we had an early path to homeownership. I watched my parents struggle. I mean, even to this day, they struggle. They don't own. They've rented for the last 20 years, and it's just devastating to me that they're in their 70s with no assets. And so, I learned early on from a poor example of what I didn't want for my life. And that was A, no assets, and B, financial struggle. Right.
Yep.
And so we bought our first house in 2003. And we actually, funny enough, we sold that house. We never intended to sell that house, but we had to eventually because the market crashed and we had the spec home, and that was easier to sell than this one. So we moved into the spec home for 11 months before we short sold it. And the only reason we were able to even keep the situation as keep the impact to a minimum is because we made $100,000 in 2 years on our first one. So we've thankfully since then made different decisions as homeowners, and are in a really good spot from a financial standpoint with a lot of equity. And we've leveraged our equity to purchase these investment properties.
Awesome. So I guess, one of the things you've kind of alluded to is you guys created your own rules, right? You had to create new rules based on how you were going to do it this time. So how did you pick where and when and how to invest?
So before I answer that question, I guess one thing that I'd like to say as far as the rules that we created, I think everybody has to create those for themselves. Everybody's risk tolerance is different. But I am a firm believer, and this is something I talk to my clients about, you really need to have a 6-month minimum reserve fund just for your day-to-day, your own mortgage, your own car payment, your own 4 walls, your cost of living, before I would ever encourage somebody to buy an investment property. Because there would be no upside to investing if there wasn't risk, right? And that risk needs to be mitigated with some fundamental sound financial principles put in place. So those were the rules we created for ourselves. We have to have a minimum of 6 months reserves in the bank, so that if we did have vacancies or we're not looking at, oh God, do we pay our own mortgage payment or the investment payment? We don't have to make those tough decisions, right?
Right.
So that's as far as that goes. As far as where, the very first question I ask every investor client that I get is, what is your goal? Is it cash flow or is it appreciation? They always want to say both, and that's great. The goal is one with the hopes of the other as a backup or supplement. And the reason for that is because you have to be singularly focused. They're different strategies. And for us, and just kind of the financial path that we're on, we're cash flow driven. We are trying to replace my husband's income as he works towards retirement. And so we're strictly cash flow driven. We're doing other things to develop a nest egg. And so appreciation is certainly an objective, but it's secondary to cash flow for us. And in my market, cash flow is hard right now. It's really tough to obtain unless you're putting a significant amount of money down. So we picked a market that had appreciation. It's slow compared to my market, but they're not stagnant. I don't want a stagnant market, but so some growth, but the appreciation in rents is actually greater paced than the appreciation is in the home. And so the entry level price is so low that we're able to cash flow really well. And that's how we chose the area.
Yeah. when you talk about replacing your husband's income, what's the big goal that you're working towards? Can you share that with everybody?
Yeah, we're looking at 10 properties. So our goal is $500 a door. That's kind of my baseline. So when I'm running numbers and looking at properties, I'm just looking at, can I cash flow $500 a door? And we need 10 of those. So that's our really simple plan.
And then once Brad retires, you guys get to go travel. 6 months.
Yeah, we're doing a 6-month sabbatical.
So excited. That's the benefit. Her kids were the exact same age within days, but she had her kids really young. And so now she's going to go travel the world at 40. It's amazing. 43. I know, deuces. I'm just getting ready for kindergarten over here. But I think that goes to like, we tend to buy for appreciation, which is why, Denver works for us. But yeah, when you start thinking about it as a cash flow, Denver's a tough market to cash flow in as well. Obviously with the prices, where they're at. So what did you end up investing in once you picked the market, right? So how did you end up picking? It was Fort Wayne, right?
Fort Wayne, Indiana. So their median sales price is $190. The 2 properties that we've purchased were 222 and 227. And we wanted, for interest rate sake and just again being aggressive but safe at the same time, we are putting 25% down, traditional investment loan. So in order for the economies of scale to work in our approach, we can't buy $1 million properties and get the scale that we need, right? So I would prefer to go that route. So they're single family, 3-2. And it's funny. I mean, our median is 560. So when I see a median of 190, it's like, oh my gosh, I can spend 300. Send me your best. And my agent there is like, no, that doesn't make sense. You need to be 250 and under, and that's going to get you the perfect house. The property manager there, I was looking at 4 bedrooms and I'm like, oh, that's great. And he's like, no, 3 bedroom, 2 bath. So really leaning into the experts in that market is so important, right? I'm looking at it and going like, whoa, this is so affordable. I can go big. And they're like, no, this is where you need to stay, and direct me to what is going to rent the best. In fact, it's funny. I was just talking to my agent in Fort Wayne, and he said, I just had lunch with Fred, who is our property manager there, and obviously introduced to me through that agent. And he said, man, if everybody could just buy the properties that Alicia has purchased, I would be a happy man, because we've just stayed in the lane of like, tell us what to buy and we'll buy it. And not tried to get cute or fancy or anything, just stay in the lane. So 3-2, 1,500 square feet or bigger, and built between 2010 and today. So that's our criteria.
And what are the rental rates?
1,800. We get $1,795 for each door.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it's good. It's a nice home, right? I mean, I've seen the pictures. They're very nice homes. What appealed to you about Fort Wayne? Was it numbers driven primarily?
It was strictly numbers driven when I made the decision to invest there. When I went there and visited the area, man, I got excited about it. Like truly, it was strictly numbers driven. I thought, how boring, Fort Wayne, Indiana. I don't even know where that is. I have to look it up on a map. But I've since learned, they have a ton of business development. They have the cutest downtown. It's a up and coming city. One of the criteria that we look at when we're looking at where to invest is like, what's the employment base? Obviously, that's a fundamental question when it comes to investing. And who are the employees? Who are the renters going to be? Why do they rent? And their 2 primary employment bases are school district, the school district, and 2 big hospitals. So the unique thing about Fort Wayne is they have this like highly educated, affluent employment base within the hospitals, but they're transient because they're in residency or they're doing specific fellowships or like, and so they don't stay for very long. So many of them don't buy but they're affluent and high salaried. And so you kind of have this great base of renters who move often. So they're not looking to settle in and purchase, but have good income.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if there's incentives to work in that hospital. If it's like rural, I can't say that word, rural enough that there's incentives to go through that hospital.
Yeah. And it's definitely not rural. I mean, the area is not rural, but it's surrounded by that, right? Yeah. Especially, Colorado and Utah, we fly into our cities and it's all mountains. You fly in to Indiana and you're like, I can see for days.
I know. Is there a sky club there?
That's a story for another day.
Yes, exactly.
Hey, we do have a question.
Sure. Go ahead, Trey.
First of all, Samantha's loving this, and asking, how would you guys recommend figuring out which markets are growing versus stagnant? Would that be like talking to agents or just your own research?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's actually a really great question. I just looked into Arkansas. Literally like 2 weeks ago, I was running numbers on some properties because, again, I mean, they're more affordable than Indiana. But then what I asked the agent for was the last 10 years of sales data for appreciation, and just looking at what has their market done in the last 10 years. Since 2013, when we kind of started to really come out of the recession, if there should be some significant growth, right? It doesn't really matter where. And they have all but stayed stagnant. So never mind. Even though the numbers today look really great, I'm going to sell it for virtually the same price 10 years from now. So that market's off the table for me.
Was it Little Rock area or which part?
Yes. Yep. So where Jody Huffmaster is.
Yep. So we are in a coaching company that we have agents across the country and up in Canada. And so it's nice because we get to have these kinds of conversations, and then we can have the local experts pull the information. So if you have any markets you're specifically interested in, like, reach out and I will definitely help direct you to those agents. And I know Alicia would be happy to help with that too. I kind of like to look at, adjacency, right? So like, what's going to be the next fill in the blank? So when we, and you can kind of watch trends on where corporations are moving, right? And, San Antonio is doing crazy things now. We have a great friend, Dick's down there, who actually one of my clients has been connected with for potentially investing in one of his big projects. So San Antonio is doing a lot of things. Again, you have a lot of transient with the four bases there. And then I really like Louisville, Louisville, and because I think it's going to be the next Nashville. So you kind of have to look. I like to look at, like Alicia said, the industry too. Like, what's the diversity of industry? When you see what happened to Detroit, right? Which I think Detroit will come back. We need it, right? But when it was so dependent on one industry, that is very detrimental, obviously, for a market. So any other questions right now, Tracy?
Nope, not at the moment.
Okay. What was your biggest fear when you decided to invest in real estate? I guess I should say, did you have fear the first time around?
I'm a pretty I'm a risk taker. I'm kind of in this belief that there's always more, like I can always make more. But I recognize that that's a little bit unique. I also am not an employee, so I don't have like a set salary that somebody else has set for me. So I think that's critical. One of the things that we teach in our investment class is the cash flow quadrants from Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and understanding you can live in multiple quadrants and be an investor or self-employed and an employee and a business owner. You can live in several different quadrants, but it's important to, as you get towards building financial wealth, if you live in only the employee quadrant, it's going to have more challenges. It's possible, but it's just more challenges are going to exist. So while living in the employment or employee quadrant, also stepping into other, whether that's a small side business, side hustle, or looking at, the market or real estate as the investment quadrant, whatever that looks like, so that you can lift the ceiling a bit to what that income looks like. So I don't know that I didn't really have big fears around it. My husband did. He did the first time before we crashed. And that's his personality. He's way more comfort driven, safe driven. His dad has run and owned a business for 35 years, 40 years. And he is the classic example of just work hard and save. And, he just could have done so much more had he taken a little bit of risk along the way. And my husband has some of those tendencies. So we balance each other out. He pulls me back when necessary. But I think in talking to most of my clients who invest, there's always just the question of, am I going to pick the wrong property?
Yeah.
And I think going back to the fundamental, you can always sell it. You can always rent it. There's just always a way out. And I think when it comes to, if you have the fundamentals in place, that 6 months reserves, and you're taking care of your 4 walls first, it relieves a lot of the fear of going out and investing in something else, right? Because your house is taken care of. Without that, I think there would be a lot more fear around it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if somebody over leverages themselves, that definitely comes with the scarcity, the fear, for sure. I love that you still go. I mean, I don't know if 6 months is the rich dad, poor dad standard of 6 months of expense.
I don't think so.
No, but it's still, that's the kind of conservative baseline that we want people to have.
Yeah.
And I always say you can have part of that in a HELOC. Even my uncle, who's a financial advisor, says that. So you can have rainy day funds as a part of a HELOC, especially when you're in a non-employee type of job, right? Like we are. Do you have your sights set on any other markets right now?
No, not really. I think we'll probably end up with 6 in Fort Wayne, and then continue to explore all other markets. I am constantly looking at other markets. And I should say, and to Lindsay's point, we have this benefit, and which all of you can tap into through Lindsay. We have this benefit of a network of agents across the entire country and Canada. So any market you want to explore, Lindsay can connect you to explore those markets, right? You just have to have the fundamental questions to answer, or to ask rather. We will absolutely buy something in Utah.
Yeah.
To add on the appreciation factor. But our goal is first to hit our cash flow goal and then focus on appreciation.
Yeah.
And we'll leverage those properties to get that.
Exactly. Awesome. I love it. Excuse me. What would you want someone new to real estate investing to know?
Lean into the experts. I'm a realtor, so that sounds real biased, but but I'm living it myself. I could have said, oh, I know how this goes. I'm a realtor, and gone into Fort Wayne on my own. No way. And I would have made some mistakes, even just in questions that I was getting, or properties that I was proposing to my realtor there. And he's like, hang on a second, let's look at this. And I'll tell you why. I think it's so important that you lean into your experts. Property management from a rental analysis standpoint, and making sure that you understand the nitty gritty of really where and what, and your realtor to make sure you're protected. On both of those properties, we competed and against other offers. And we have to make sure that at the end of the day we win, but the numbers still make sense. And so having somebody with relationships in that local market that can really leverage that and fight for you and advocate for you to be the winning offer, while still making sure that it pencils and the numbers make sense, that's a delicate balance. And I wouldn't do that without an expert on my side, Yeah.
You bring up, obviously, the real estate agent. the housing expert, the local expert as far as that. But then we also need to make sure you have the right lender in place, right? That's helping you navigate what loans are going to make most sense. You mentioned the property manager, always an attorney. You never know. You want to make sure you at least have someone, I have a great attorney here in Denver, but in each market, you want to make sure you have one just in case. And so, yeah, I think that's a good point. What are property management rates there in Fort Wayne?
10%.
10. Okay.
Which is similar to my market. So
Yeah,
I think it's
same.
pretty standard. I mean, here we fluctuate anywhere between about 8 and 13%. 10 is the standard.
Yep. Same. And it's worth it for you guys.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I think
Well,
that's
especially,
important.
I mean, I would not manage properties here locally myself. Everything is about efficacy for me and time and the dollar related to the time. Right.
Right.
So I wouldn't manage local properties on my own, but sure as hell, I'm not going to manage on my own when it's, a flight away.
Right.
Doesn't make sense. So
No, for sure.
the other person of that team, I would say is really important is an insurance agent that you trust.
Yes.
And your realtor typically can be the core to those relationships, which was the case in Fort Wayne. I interviewed the insurance agent that he suggested, and he's been great. So
that's awesome. And the other one we're missing is the financial planner, which I know you work very closely with your financial planner, which can help with the projections and help you really understand the bigger picture when stepping out. And, our financial planners that we work with, I know, understand that, real estate, especially being in the industry, but also it's a good path for a lot of people to diversify their investments for sure.
Yeah. I don't know if you can tell me that this is a topic for another day, but something I think not enough people are talking about is why real estate is so important in the inflationary market that we're in today.
We were going to talk about it. So it's a topic for today for sure. No. Let's stay on that. And I think that we, touched on it a little bit with fear, right? People still are afraid of a bubble, which is, we talk about this all the time in our business. It's a supply and demand issue, right? So we don't have a bubble happening now. What Alicia was talking about happened to the home they bought in 2007 was poor lending practices and poor regulations and everyone in bed with each other, probably literally and figuratively. 'Tis the season, right? But anyways, when we talk about hedging against inflation, Alicia, let's talk about that because of the fear basis of it.
Yeah. So I think if you really, really elementary, inflation means that our dollars are worth less tomorrow than they are today, right? We pump too much money into the market. That means there's more demand than there is supply. So you have this inflation in price. We're in a really unique inflationary market just because of the crazy components that have added to, you have trillions of dollars of money being pumped in as a result of a pandemic. You have supply chain issues because of the pandemic. There's really unique things that we haven't seen all come together in my lifetime, certainly in a long time. But so how do you hedge against that? Well, if you have cash sitting in the bank, it's losing its value every day, right? January's inflation numbers were 7.5%. So literally the dollars in your bank account are worth 7.5% less today than they were December 31st. That's not a good strategy for the long term. So how do you hedge against that? Well, we need a fixed priced asset. Because if our mortgage payment never goes up, because we're in a fixed priced mortgage payment, but the rents are going to increase, that is to your benefit, right? But if you're putting your money somewhere where it's impacted by inflation and going up and down, then you're just at the whims of inflation or victim to inflation versus leveraging it in a way where you fix the price, that mortgage payment stays the same, and then you take the benefits of inflation from a rent basis. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So
Absolutely.
Real estate, in my opinion, is the best hedge against inflation because it's a fixed price asset.
Yeah. It's a fixed payment on an appreciating asset. That's the craziness, right? When we're locking into these 30-year loans, 15-year loans, And yeah, I mean, that's not just, we're in the game, right? So it seems a little self-promoting, but every economist is talking about how that's the best way to hedge against the inflation that's bound to happen.
Yeah.
And the other thing I tell people, when you think about your retirement planning and how much money you're going to need, don't worry, because as things cost more, so does rents, right? So if you know that you need $10,000 a month to live, you can do that in today's dollars, knowing that the dollar is going to fluctuate the same as the rents will. And so if rents are going up, so are your expenses, right? And so it's a good thing to be able to plan today based on what you're going to need in today's dollar, knowing that the rent is going to mimic that same growth, which is not as easy to do with other investments.
Yeah. And one thing going back to the question about what do I want a new investor to know? You said something that triggered this thought with expenses. You can make any numbers look the way you want them to look on paper. Mm-hmm. That's silly, right? Like, so if you are, the practical tool that I use is called Property Evaluator. It's an app. I think it's $40 a year. I use it on my desktop. You can just go into your app store and find it. Property Evaluator, but it gets nitty gritty, and it's a really quick way to answer the questions of what is my cash flow? What is my cash on cash return? What's my cap rate? Like, what does this look like long-term if I were to hold it 5 years, 10 years, but what does today's cash flow look like? And just allows you to really very simply evaluate a property's numbers. But you can put whatever numbers you want in there and make it look really pretty. And then reality hits and you have this property. So be realistic. Find out what the actual property taxes are on a property for an investor, because most often counties have different property tax percentages. They take the percentage on a different valuation for primary residence versus an investor. So you need to know that. Like for here on our MLS, there's a property tax number, but that's based on a homeowner being a owner occupant. And it's almost double that amount for an investor. So I can't throw the number that just right off the MLS into their property evaluator, because it would throw off their cash flow per month. If it shows $1,800 when in reality it's $3,600, that's a big change to your cash flow each month. So talk to the insurance agent, find out what insurance would be, make actual genuine, realistic numbers to run your evaluation. Otherwise it's not going to work. You know what I mean?
Right. No, for sure. And that's a big piece of it, is making sure we're helping you ask the right questions, right? I mean, that's whether you're buying your primary home or an investment, it's all about empowering and educating people to get the information they need to make the right decisions so they can feel really confident with it, so that 2 months in, if they have an issue, they can go, nope, we accounted for this. We know what this is going to look like, and there's not going to be that like, oh, should I not have done it? Because yeah, there are variables that you can definitely plan on, and then things you can't, right? That's interesting. Is it different tax rates in Fort Wayne too?
Yeah, it's 2% versus 1%. And the way it works here in Utah is it's 1% always, but they do a 55% exemption rate on the assessed value. So if the property the value is assessed at $1 million, then you're only paying 1% on $450,000 as a homeowner or owner occupant, and 1% on $1 million if you're an investor. So it's a big change.
Yeah. We don't have that here. So that's interesting. I know. We have very low taxes, relatively speaking.
We do too, really low. When you're paying, as you know, property, the county assessor's property valuation is really low in compared to what the market valuation is in a market like this, where we're having such rapid appreciation. They just can't keep up with it. especially because we're a non-disclosure state.
That's-
But so 1% is low of that anyway. But then you take a 55% reduction or exemption to that, and it's exceptionally low.
Yeah.
We could talk about what that does to our school ratings and property taxes, or all of that, but that's a conversation for another day.
I think that's a different podcast. Yeah. Okay, this is our final question. And then if anyone else has any questions, throw them in the chat. But what is the biggest myth you see in real estate investing?
That that I can't do it, that it's
Yeah.
beyond possibility. People have so much more access to resources than they think, but they've told themselves it's out of reach.
Yeah.
And it's usually not.
Yeah. I like that. I would parlay onto that as kind of the other extreme, is that more is better, right? I think intentionality, whether it's, buying investments. I was talking with a friend about this yesterday. It's being really intentional about what you're going to need and then working into it that way. I always tell people, and we're going to continue to have these kinds of conversations with, I call us investors next door, more of your, self-made investors that aren't necessarily inheriting, looking at you 45, hundreds of apartments, right? And hundreds of buildings and hundreds of units. Instead, we're doing it all on our own. And I think that is, it's fun to get to do it from the beginning and be really strategic about it. So you can do it and you don't need 300 to retire. I think those are like two extremes of myths.
Yeah, for sure. I just posted in the chat a link to a board game. If you haven't ever heard of the cash flow board game, this sounds really simple, or maybe even silly, but this is a Rich Dad Poor Dad thing. And it's similar to Monopoly, but you basically have small deals and big deals. And when you're playing the game, you invest it, you get to pull a card when it's your turn to invest, and you can either pull from the big deals pile or the small deals pile. And when you first start playing the game, you're like, shoot, I'm going to go for the big deal, and you realize real quick, but then the cards that you can land on, similar to Monopoly, where it's like the chest, and it could be a good or a bad. Suddenly, when it's a negative, it's real negative on the big deals. If it's a negative, it's smaller negative on the small deals. And, it's interesting. My husband and I were just having this conversation as we were reviewing 2021 and just kind of recapping the year and what were our wins. And, I said, I'm really proud of us for going back to the small deals and really taking the approach that fits within our goals long-term and not getting, and I hesitate saying this, but like financially, we could go for a big deal. We have the resources to do that, but that would be a bad decision for us. And so it's like slow and steady, be really smart about this. My mortgage payment on these properties are both less than $1,000, $942 for one of them. And it just, in the worst case scenario, I could float that for quite a while. And I feel really good about that. And that gives me the confidence to go for the next one. And so when we're talking about the myths and like you're saying, go big, I just think it's so important. You learn really quick through this game that the way to win the game is to start with the small deals and parlay that into big deals. And so we used to play this all the time as a company, and use it as a tool for teaching our students. And it's just kept in my mind that you've got to start with the small deals and make sure it makes sense. So.
Do you make the boys play?
Yes, they have played. There's cash flow for kids too.
Oh, fun. Okay. That's what Ben told me. Yeah. That's awesome. I didn't even know that existed. It's fun.
Yeah.
Okay. I love that. What other questions? Any other questions out there? Thanks for posting that, Alicia.
Yep.
I think we're good on questions. There was a quiet group today.
Sorry to be so boring.
Well, you covered a lot, and no, it's good. It's good information. And I love you guys' path and journey you're on. I guess one other question I have for you is, are you looking at doing anything short-term? These are long-term leases, right? Short-term rentals. Are you looking at doing any Airbnb vacation home type of deal?
We're smack in the middle of evaluating that. There's actually, so St. George is about 4.5 hours from me. It's a vacation market. We're looking at a townhome right now that is in a community that it's called Desert Color. If anybody's looking for other markets for their strategies, this is a great potential. It's a resort community where there's on-site management. There's a 2-acre like lake pool man-made thing. And the builder has set aside a very small portion of the homes that are allowed to be nightly rentals. The rest are owner occupant only or long-term rentals, 6 months plus. And we're looking at that right now to see if the numbers make sense. It is what I would consider to be a big deal. And so I'm battling between that right now, if it makes sense. So it's on my radar, but it's also not in my comfort zone.
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting. We'll share in the follow-up. AirDNA, which is a local company here that analyzes Airbnb success, right? And rates and occupancy and all of that. Some of the data is free, and then you pay, you can pay an upgrade to see more of the data. But they sent out their top 10 short-term rental markets. And they're in some like lower price points. So I'll forward that. Yeah, I'll forward it to you, but then also we'll forward it out to the group too. So
cool.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, Alicia.
You're welcome.
Love it. I can't wait to see what you buy next. She's always working on something. One of the smartest women I know and the kindest. So thank you so much for sharing. And yeah. Oh, I also want to send them the class you're doing.
Oh, okay.
Investing class, because you're going to do a virtual option, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
I want to hop on it. I think it's going to be, we looked at the data a little bit when we were together in Montana, or the slides, I guess. So yeah. That'd be awesome.
That's on March 30th. So.
Okay, perfect. Cool. Well, we'll get it sent out to everyone. Thanks for hopping on, everyone. I hope you had a nice lunch hour of learning, and we'll see you soon. See you next month.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.